friends, welcome to the channel. I am the GM Philosopher, and today we're talking about designing awesome D&D one-shots. There is an art form to planning a one-shot. It's different than planning a campaign, and while it can be easier in some ways it is actually much, much harder, and we're going to talk about how to do this. Now, I've got to give a shout out. This episode was inspired by a request from DeanBartel 6343, and I've got to really say thank you to DeanBartel for requesting this. And if you have a video request, if you'd like me to cover a topic, please drop a comment and let me know. I love to get requests because it lets me know how I can help best. You can hear my thoughts, you can hear my inspiration, and maybe it will even inspire you to do something new in your games that will make them better. The question was, got another one for you, GM Josh, how to write and run a one-shot. I've played my fair share of one-shots, but I just can't wrap my head around it. I can see start, conflict, big boss, end, but I'm thinking way too much and too deeply about it that it'd probably turn into a try shot, as in try too hard. And that is absolutely true. This is exactly the problem that I used to run into with these things. And I'm going to just jump right into my 5-step philosophy for one-shots. These are the 5 steps that I always try to adhere to. And when I stick with them and I take them seriously, and then I really plan the one-shot out according to these 5 sort of like rules, then my one-shots end up really fun. And a lot of times they'll end up with players asking, hey, can this become a full-fledged campaign? This is really awesome. And so that's what we want, is we want players who have so much fun at the one-shot that they just think, man, I wish there was more to this. And that's when you know you've run a successful one-shot. Now, before I jump too far into this, if you would please just give me a thumbs up and a subscribe. That would help me so much, help me grow my channel. I'm trying to grow my channel. I'm really striving to hit that 2,000 subscriber mark, and every single thumbs up helps my video get shared with more people. So thank you so much for that. And we're going to jump into it right now. Number 1, start close to the end. Okay, this is where I think a lot of people misunderstand kind of like the construction of a one-shot. A lot of people think, oh, we're going to begin a story, there's going to be conflict, and then there's going to be some kind of conclusion. But the truth is that there isn't a whole lot of time to develop a whole story. What you're really doing is talking about one part of a story. One of the best, most successful, and one of my favorite one-shots I ever ran was a Star Wars one-shot where basically there were 3 players and they were playing 3 Jedi Knights. They were on a ship, and they were transporting this imprisoned Sith Lord who was frozen in like cryo to a prison world. And they were supposed to make sure he got there. And then, of course, halfway through, stuff starts breaking down and the Sith Lord thaws out and starts roaming the ship. So it's like a horror, mystery, action Star Wars thing. Now, one of the reasons that this one-shot worked out so well was that we started so close to the end of the story, or that arc of the story. We didn't cover how they captured him. We didn't cover any of that. It was just, you're almost to the prison planet. You just have to get there and keep him in cryo sleep, and then everything goes wrong. See, so by keeping the arc very concise, you're giving yourself room to play and to explore details without just running way overboard and not being able to fit everything in. So choose a small swath of time and story to deal with. Start close to the end. Like, so you want to start very, very close to the end, right before the conclusion, basically. And that'll give you time, because a D&D session, one-shot might be, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours long, but you don't have a ton of time in there if you want to allow for any player creativity. And that leads us to number 2. Structure it like a movie, not like a show. Game of Thrones is a great example of a long-term D&D campaign. Like there are all of these episodes, but they make this one long story. They cover many arcs. There are loops opening and closing in different episodes, right? However, we want to think of one-shots as a movie, and a very particular type of movie. Let's take a movie, for example, The 13th Warrior. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie, but basically it's about this Viking guy who is like this king. He's like a prince of this little village. And there is the main character is like this like guy from the Middle East. And he is traveling, and I don't even remember why he's traveling, but he ends up stopping at this little village, and he ends up spending the night here. And then this old lady, this messenger comes and says, our village is being attacked. This old lady rolls the bones and says 13 warriors must go, but one of them cannot be basically from here. He has to be an outsider. So they all look at him and they're like, you're the 13th warrior. And he goes on this adventure with them. And so But that movie is an example of how the pacing works well to tell a long-term story, but there's really too much ground to cover for it to be a successful one shot. So it's not a good example of a good one shot. A good example of a movie that fits the structure of a one shot would be a movie like Speed, okay, with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. I don't know if any of you have seen this older movie, but the thing about Speed is the whole movie is about them being in this runaway bus that can't slow down because it's wired with explosives. So it's a very simple premise, and it all takes place very close to the end, right? That's kind of an example of a structure of a movie that you would want to kind of emulate for a one shot. You want to really make the arc tight and close. You don't want to have too much spread out story to have to go through because there's probably not going to be time. Okay. And that's how you can get great detail and make the pacing feel good. So that's kind of my second rule of thumb as I think about. Now, number 3, realize that time will fly. Okay. If you're trying to run a one shot in 2 hours, that's super tight. 3 hours, 4 hours is way better. 5 hours, 6 hours is going to be even better. But the truth of the matter is that no matter what span of time you pick, the time is going to race. So that leads us to number 4, which is keep it super, super simple. Okay. Which really leads us to number 5, which is you'll probably only have room for 3 components in your one shot if you are going to allow for any player riffing or creativity or role play at all, which you do want to allow. You want to allow a lot of that. So the 3 components are going to be the hook, the conflict, mystery, thing the characters need to do. Okay, this part needs to be really fun, but really simple. And then the resolution, probably a fight or a battle or some kind of climactic scene. You really only have time for these 3 components, and you want to compress them into a very small, isolated, but interesting story arc. And then you want to unfold them, but you want it to happen in a very simple way. You shouldn't require a whole bunch of storytelling in order to get to the point, right? So you want to keep the hook very simple, the conflict / mystery / thing the characters need to do. You want to keep that very simple. And then the resolution should also be simple and concise. With that being said, if you have trouble coming up with awesome plot hooks, or you want a tool to help you create awesome plot hooks on the fly, you should check out my Ultimate Plot Randomizer. This is an ebook that I created that I give away for free. There's a link in the description. Join my email list, and you can get this book delivered. Well, it will be delivered within seconds of you signing up for my email list as a free download in the first email. In this book, there are 4 D100 tables that let you roll plot arcs on the fly, like immediately. Roll a couple times, you're going to have an awesome plot arc. There are plot hook beginnings, there are conflicts, and there are resolutions, and there's even a wild and wacky table to just throw an extra thing in there to keep your players guessing. So I would love for you to download this. It is my gift to you, and you can get on my email list. I send out cool D&D tips and stuff that I don't even discuss here on the channel, so you can also be kept aware of the stuff I'm thinking about and working on, and we can converse more via email, which is awesome. So anyway, grab it, my gift to you. Link is in the description. Maybe this will help you with your one shot. Now, I'm going to kind of talk briefly about what I mean by you only have room for these 3 components. Okay, so the hook. How are you going to hook the players in? In my experience, some of the very best hooks are the simplest hooks. So for example, in this one shot I ran where the Sith Lord was frozen in cryo, it was already set up to be kind of like something wasn't right. So that's one of the keys is from the beginning, that isn't the hook, but it's like that's the small story arc starting close to the end. It's like there's already a lot of tension here. There's tension already. And this is, I think, a good way to go into a one shot is that there's tension. Now, the hook here was the power goes out. And then they're like, oh my God, this is bad. We knew this was going to happen, but now it's happening, right? So it's like that was the hook. That was the inciting incident. There were some little clues leading up to it. Like one of them was looking at him through the glass, and they were like, I was like, you detect the heartbeat rises for a moment and then it goes back down, right? So there's a little mystery. They're like, what's going on here? But it turned out that then the power went out and then he broke out of his cryo chamber and they had to fight him, right? But that was the inciting incident was a thing. Another really successful one shot I ran, a D&D one shot, was where this group of people were basically going to this ancient temple And they started literally climbing down the mountain toward the front of the temple. Like they had arrived at the temple. In a big like campaign, multi-part campaign, that would be like the beginning of the conclusion. But this was the beginning of the one shot. So we were kind of starting at the beginning of the conclusion, which was they're approaching this. Now they had with them this witch, and the whole point was they were going to take her into the temple and they were going to sacrifice her. And that's how they were going to open the secret compartment. And the idea was that this was once a dragon temple, and then there was supposedly dragon treasure, and they were going to get it. That's kind of the point. But this witch, and I really I tried to make it interesting. And she was wearing, in my campaigns, there's sometimes this artifact that they call the witch's helmet, which is basically a metal, like steel helmet with like bars on it, so she can see and you can see her face. But there's a hook that goes in her mouth that clips to her tongue that makes it so that anytime she tries to speak, they use it on wizards too, but anytime the person tries to speak, this clip cuts into their tongue, and if they keep trying to speak, it actually removes their tongue. So it's supposed to be kind of a torture device / a way to keep spellcasters from casting spells / a way to permanently render them unable to cast spells if they try to cast spells. So it's called a witch's helmet. So she was wearing this witch's helmet, and they were like beating her up and being rough to her. And some of the players, like there were NPCs who were in their gang who were like doing this, but some of the NPCs were like took pity on her. And I kind of included clues that might indicate that she wasn't actually a witch, that they had falsely imprisoned her and she was being falsely accused of being a witch. So this was like just mystery, literally all in the first 5 minutes leading down to the door of the temple. But then the hook, or the inciting incident, was that once they got into the temple and they got to the center room. So this was all happening in the very first 10 minutes. They get to the center room where she's supposed to be sacrificed. And then basically it's like time for the players to act if they believe that she's actually innocent. And several of them did. Like basically the gang removed the helmet and they were like, don't you try to cast any spells. And then they were preparing the ritual. There was a spellcaster with them. Or actually, if I remember right, one of the players was a wizard, and they gave him the ritual and said, you do this, set up this ritual, like the gang leader or whatever. But there was a moment where they could talk to her alone, and she was like, I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch. So this was the hook. This was the inciting incident to it, right? So this happened very fast. This happened within the first 15 minutes, and it was simple. It was, I'm not a witch. Please save me. So what's going on? Are we going to sacrifice her? Are we going to open this treasure? Or is she not a witch? Are we going to kill her, and even though she's innocent, right? So there's this hook inciting incident. Now, there's a conflict, mystery, or thing the characters need to do. This part needs to be really fun, but really simple. So what is it? In this story example, it was very simple. Decide if she's innocent, and or then either save her or whatever. What ended up happening was they ended up deciding they were going to just try to sprinkle a little bit of her blood on the altar, not kill her, and see if that worked, because they were convinced that she might not have actually been a witch. But the rest of the gang did not like this. The rest of the gang turned on them, trying to take her away from them. Turned out there was a fight, like a group fight, team fight, okay? So then there was a fight. Players won, took out the gang members, tried to open the thing with a little bit of her blood. This was like a puzzle element. See, this is very simple. And this was so at this point, we're an hour and a half in. Now they're sprinkling the blood and there's a puzzle. Okay. And it's is it going to work? Is it not going to work? It worked. What does this mean? She was a witch. She lied to them. What should they do now? See, but then it opens, and then there's this sort of dungeon crawlish type little segment where there are these little baby dragons who start attacking them, right? So she's helping to fight them. So they have this situation where there's this witch who lied about not being a witch. Her blood did open the thing, and now they're being attacked by dragons. And she's saying, we don't have time to argue about this. We have to stop these dragons to get the treasure. So it turns out that she might have manipulated them, right? So this is the conflict / mystery / thing the characters need to do. And then it culminated in the resolution, boss fight, whatever, which was where an adult dragon came in. These were its babies and it attacked them, right? One thing to know, I should also mention, which I thought was really cool about this one shot, was this whole temple was built in the skeleton of a great ancient dragon whose skeleton was there and it had like been preserved. And so the bones of the skeleton kind of made up the structure of the opening. And then you went underground under the skeleton into the temple. So I thought that was a really cool element there. I just wanted to share that because I was proud of it. But anyway, so you can see how now this one shot was probably about a 4.5 hour one shot. So we had the hook, which took maybe 15-ish minutes, 20 minutes maybe, by the time the players introduced, describe their characters and stuff. I brought pre-generated character sheets to this because none of these people had ever played D&D before. That's why they're wanting to run a one shot. Number two, we had the hook incident, which took about maybe 20 minutes. We had the conflict mystery type situation where basically they sprinkled the blood. There was a little puzzle business. There was a little arcane magic business. They had to figure out how to open the mechanism. And then there was a little bit of dungeon crawliness. So that probably took about, dungeon crawliness with fighting small little dragons. So little combat. This probably took an hour and a half, going through it. And then we had the conclusion, which probably took about an hour, right? So when you add up the time, you realize, and keep in mind that we're pausing here. It all just isn't story driven. There's a lot of player interaction. They're interacting with the witch. She was interacting with them. She was playing on their emotions, kind of telling them her backstory. They were having like little secret meetings with each other. Like, what should we do about this? They were really invested, which was super cool. So you've got to allow time and room for role players to role play, right? And to role play their characters. Even in a one shot, this is really important. In fact, this can add a lot of flavor and make it really good. So anyway, you can see how, like, by keeping this such a tightly woven arc in a very small context, and then keeping it simple to these three components and making those three components very simple, but interesting. And that's the key. Simple, but interesting. Simple and boring is not good. Simple, super fast, no interest is not good. What we would want is we want simple, but we also want something that makes it interesting. So there's like, the rogue and the wizard have to figure out this arcane mechanism. They drip the blood in, there was a paladin he was wrestling with the morality of the thing. This was kind of interesting for him. There were symbols of gods on it. He was going to help with that. There was a fighter. And when the, fighting started, it's like, oh, you realize you're going to have to use some tactics. They could swarm you, so everyone I worked it out to where everyone had a part to play that was actually important, that was well suited to their class and character. And this helped to make it interesting and helped to kind of challenge each player. And that, I think, made it more successful and interesting. And the players really seemed to like it. And it was super fun session. So it had to be compact, though, and it had to be very, very simple, but interesting. And then the resolution, it's really important that you be mindful of like when you start the concluding like fight, because as you know, in D&D, those fights can drag out a bit. So you want to allow yourself like a good hour for that final combat. Generally speaking, by the time you put role play in there, by the time you put a little sentimental drama in there, by the time you have the big bad evil person trying to talk them into joining them, like there's going to be some cut up stuff, and then there's going to be the actual combat. And you don't want to turn it into a long term slugfest, and you want that combat to be impactful, punchy, fast, interesting. You want to challenge each player, really focus out on challenging each player specifically. Try to give them little things to identify. Like, for example, like in this situation, have the dragon cast a spell, and it's like, wizard, can you identify what that spell is? How could this dragon know this? Is it possible that he's a polymorphed wizard? Is it truly a dragon? Is it possible this is something else? So it's like you want to put a little mystery in there. It's like, there's an old trap over there, rogue. You realize you might be able to run over there, use that mechanism to latch one of the dragon's legs and hold it there, whatever it is. So there are ways you can challenge each player. And I think that in a one shot, it's really important to spotlight each of the players in all three of these segments, which is the hook, the conflict, and then the resolution. I think that this is important in a one shot because you have so little time for emotional engagement and connection and impact. So I think it's really important, but you can keep those things brief, and you have to also allow for the role play that those things will have. And so that's why we have to really condense everything, and we have to keep things really simple and interesting. So simple and interesting and short are the keywords. So there you go. Those are my thoughts for designing awesome D&D one shots. Let me know what you think. Drop me a comment. Let me know if you think that these are good ideas. If you have some tips, if you have some creative insight, I would love to hear it. Please let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much. Hey, I really appreciate all of you. Thank you for coming back to my channel and watching another video on one of my favorite topics, the best game in the world, D&D. And I will see you on the next one.